unfortunately, you have to graduate high school in order, and you have to complete a test before you can go to university. If back then, when you were a young person, if you're a teenager. So what happened was, at that stage, I wasn't working. I had to pay rent while I was in high school. I wasn't getting any funding by my parents. And the government said they were not going to pay me because my dad wasn't telling them his taxes, because he wasn't even in Australia. So I didn't know how to navigate the bureaucracy and the system. So I became broke. And by the time I became broke, I finished high school and I just left the country. And it was a time when it was after 9/11, and there was just a lot of tension regarding people of my background and my appearance. And I just felt like I'm just going to leave and go to and live with my dad in Iran. I literally thought my dad is going to let me stay in Iran and live with him. And he's like, why don't you go to university? And I didn't know the answer to that. I just said, well, I was broke. I didn't have money. And he's like, anyway, I was broke at that time. Like, at that time, I had zero. I had lost all my money to food and rent over like a 2 year period, 2 or 3 year period. And like I said, that I should have been allowed to go to university at that point. And then I would have had a degree by the time I ended up broke, instead of just a high school, like finishing high school. Anyway, and then my dad, because he married somebody else, he decides that he doesn't want to take care of me and he doesn't want me to stay in Iran. And I said, look, I'm going to learn how to read and write in Iranian, and I'm going to stay in Iran, and I'm going to learn how to live in Iran. And he was like, no, I'm not going to like let you stay here. You're going to Australia. So he sent me to Australia, and then I was broke. Like, I had zero money. I had nowhere to live. I just put my foot in my brother's door. Like, I let myself into his house, and I stayed with my older brother. I have two brothers. Okay, I have a younger brother who's like a decade younger than me, and I have an older brother who's like a year older than me. And I just stepped my foot in my brother's house, and my older brother is kind of just like a violent. He was always jealous of me and violent, cruel. He was always jealous of my success in life, where he was like failing a lot in life until that, like, and back then. And anyway, he was beating me up, and I ended up living with my uncle in Melbourne because my brother was beating me up. So I had nowhere to live, and I was like, I was in Australia, so I just got my driver's license, my learner's driver's license. I had like a bank account and a tax file number and Medicare, but I was broke, man. I had no money. My dad just sent me to Australia. At that point, I was like a 21-year-old with no money. And looking back at that, I'm like, that is so freaking weird. But that's not the first time I had no money and I just came to Australia. It happened another time after. Anyway, so my parents say you have to live with your brother, because if you don't live with your brother, you're going to end up a heroin addict. And because people out in society are heroin addicts, and you have nowhere to live, and if you live outside in the world, you're going to become a heroin addict. People are going to shoot heroin in front of you, and you're going to become a heroin addict. So you have no other choice but to live with your brother. And my older brother wasn't particularly friendly and kind, but I don't blame him completely. I think that, we just didn't get along. It was two-sided, but at the same time, he was doing domestic violence. So if you read about domestic violence, what happens is you just punish all the time. The person deprives you of liberty, freedom. You're not allowed to do much. You're not allowed to make noise. You're not allowed to do anything in your house without being beaten up. And also, he was taking money from me as well. So anyway, I lived with my older brother for 2 years, and I at that point I was studying